It's about social-emotional learning for children in conflict areas by Vikramjeet Sinha. I'm very happy to welcome Vikram here to this session. He has worked in the social development sector for around 26 years. His work is enriched by his academic combination of social anthropology, clinical hypnotherapy, and training in arts-based therapy, watercolor-based therapy, along with his practice across all these 26 years of field work with diverse communities in difficult situations. Thank you so much, Vikram, for joining this session. Over to you. Vikram, you're on mute. Could you please unmute and share?
All right. Okay, hi. Good evening, everyone. My name is Vikramjeet Sinha. I am an arts-based therapist. I have done my work in primarily trained in trauma therapy, in clinical hypnotherapy, in arts-based therapy, as was just announced. What I'm going to take you through is basically my journey in the conflict areas and looking at how trauma plays a very important role in terms of shaping people's lives and what can be done with it, and how, as a pedagogue, as an arts-based pedagogue, how do I sort of intervene in these spaces? So I'm going to sort of narrate my journey, and I hopefully will think that it'll be interesting for you to look at what is it like to work in a marginalized area? What is it like to work in liminal spaces, in spaces where transformation is possible because of the difficulties these spaces exist? Okay, so could I have the PPT being shared? The first slide, please.
Just give a second.
Okay. Yeah, so just to tell you that what I'm going to essentially do is going to travel, take you through my journey from Sri Lanka to Kashmir, to Manipur, and you know, to look at how I worked in these states, and which have this particular law called APSPA. Now particularly the APSPA has been removed in northeastern areas. This Arms Prevention Act, which makes it into very highly militarized zones, and these spaces you know, have a certain kind of a need. So here we start with the areas of conflict. This is Sri Lanka. I worked with masks. I worked with tactile material, because tactile material was like a bridge to move from you know, the unsaid to the said. So we use this mask because it sort of contains emotions and feelings and thoughts, and you can actually non-verbally express yourself much more. So because when conflict becomes really high, you actually don't have much to say, but you sort of can only use these masks through movement and through therapy. So these are the work with the mask. I got a vision to work in conflict area in Kandy when I had gone there in 2012. Could you go to the next slide, please? This is image theater. This is oppressor rescuer this is the drama triangle, which is in image theater. We are looking at how we can look at the victim, rescuer, and oppressor. And this is in Kandy, and they're from all over South Asia. And we're looking at how we can transform the oppressor alchemically into courage, how we can look at the raw material of victim and turn it into wisdom, how we can move into the rescue and turn it into compassion. So this is how the triangle moves. This is one of the core sort of axioms through which we sort of conduct our arts-based pedagogical work in conflict areas. Okay, the next one, please. This is my entry point from Sri Lanka. I straight off went off to Srinagar, to Kashmir, and here I'm started working government schools as an entry point into. So school became a very important part to how do I enter into this world of conflict? Where do I start? So school became a very interesting place. The government school, this is Hyderabad. I'm working with trauma and education. I'm getting them to use their body, and I'm looking at you know, educating them on the flight, fright, and freeze. How we can actually through sensation remove up stress through their body so that they can actually concentrate and focus more. And here these guys are listening. This is about springtime or summertime, and we're sitting there in a circle, and then we're going to work up with our bodies and how we can sort of remove the stress out of our bodies. Okay, the next slide, please. This is 2013. The same year, the same time I visited Kupwara. This is the border of Pakistan, Kashmir, and we are here on this side, and we are sort of working with the government, with a particular school here, which has been really affected. The children here have been really affected by the conflict because of the bombardments, because of militancy, and so on and so forth. So we are looking at a very, very traditional, conservative, but we try to still get them to use their body a little bit. So I'm using the drum to create sound so that they can expel their fight and fear and freeze. And this is the work which is happening here at this particular edge of the country. The next slide, please. This is an orphanage I've been visiting for a long time, for 7 years, and this is there are these children who have been affected by conflict. Their parents, their fathers were sort of, they had sort of lost their fathers in militancy, and this is they were killed in combat. And I'm working here with the arts, trying to figure an entry point to their minds, because they're highly vulnerable, and they can very much sort of go back into violence. With this particular early interventions was important in my mind, and this is a pro bono work which I did for many years. And I kept coming for many years. This is 2013. Could you go to the next slide, please? Just want to elaborate what we did with them. This is the Squiggle, which we did as an entry point again into their minds, where they would just sort of randomly draw and then make these shapes and cut out these shapes and create narratives, and where their fears began and how they started looking at them with a lot of fear and saying, oh my God, I'm really scared of these images, which I do. So I think what we could actually look at is that, so the reason why I'm talking so fast, because I'm sort of afraid that I will sort of run out of time, because there are lots of slides. So, okay, so cool, we have time. So that's why I'm going really fast, because my sort of the inner clock starts running. So anyway, this is the entry point here. We could go to the next slide. I could talk more about it. So we are looking at flight, fight, and freeze. And this is where the seeds of violence in these young minds have been there. The trauma response, where you're looking at fight and flight, and you can see how the children in these sort of images and slides have expressed their anger. When they look at these images, they look at their own mind, and they actually see what's happening with their with what's happening in their subconscious, and you can see, I'm very angry here, don't anger me further. When these images come further to them as a mirror, they operate within these 3 parameters: the observer, the mirror, and the observer, the mirror, and you have the actor, the agency. So when they look at these 3, they are the agency looking at their own mirror, and they can observe it. Yes, I am angry. Yes, I have got anger within me, and this is looking at me. The next one, please. These images are slightly blurred, and you have a snake running towards a boy. And here in this particular corner, the snake has sort of cornered the boy, and the boy is frozen. So we looked at these images, and we sort of illustrated how the trauma response essentially was either a fight, flight, or a freeze. The snake is a very interesting symbol which keeps occurring right from my work in Kashmir to Cambodia, where a lot of young boys show the snake as a symbol of fear, which could be, one level could be that it is a phallic symbol and look at the Freudian interpretation, but there could be many things associated with the symbol, which is, it's a multi-contextual level. We look at a symbol in art. So it could be time, it could be poison, it could be their own anger, it could be many things, but it's very interesting to see a recurring symbol which keeps on coming. Yeah, so we have these 2 images of fight and freeze. The earlier was the fight. Okay, the next one, please. So look at these kind of faces which explained their own truncated bodies, their disembodied selves. And you can see the leg is not here, the face is only covered half. So they looked and they're angry felt. So their own self-perception of themselves were fractured, ugly. And so you could see what fear, anger, trauma, pain, abandonment could do to these images. And when we look at a shift, we have to see how these images actually shift. These images, when they start, their self-image, when they actually shifts, we know that there has been a movement. We know that there has been healing. So these are portraits of the self with its different faces and bodies. Yeah, so let's go. But before that, we just want to say that when the legs are not there, and you have this half faces, sort of bodies, hands missing, it's basically that they are not complete. And it is actually one of the signs that trauma exists, because there's this dismemberment which happens within the body, which art sort of reflects. The next one, please. So this as years go by, this is a second visit, 2014. And here I have started moving into more with tactile material. So the tactile material is like a bridge between the child and the adult world. This is what I sort of discovered while working through the tactile material. So they have been cardboard houses here. Why the structure? Because the emotional structure is missing. Their own private spaces are missing. So I got them to build these houses with these stick figures, talking about the narrative of pain and about these warriors, you know, and these guardians. I sort of gave them a simulation. And then they use this as a way to say how, they start telling their own life, their life story through this narrative, through this framework, which was very interesting. You know, their pain, their possibilities, and whether they were vendetta driven or whether they were forgiveness driven or what happened. So fantasy is like a mirror, which often sort of reflects their lives, and children can actually use this as a way to talk about what's going on in the inner world and what also has happened in their outer world. And how is it educative? Because they start looking at life skills and conversations about life skills, choices, decision making, improvisation, spontaneity. And we start using this because, as an addition to what school teaches, we start looking at how the social emotional aspect gets reflected in these narratives which these children bring about. You know, many of them have lost their parents, many of them also come from poverty, and you know, so how do these houses reflect their inner lives? Yeah, so next one, please. Okay, so we have this one, this is quite intense. This is where we're looking at the forest. This is you know, we use a straw to blow the paint across, and this is a dark forest, which is a lot of possibilities can happen, transformation can happen, and we look at the hero's journey through this dark forest. And as you can see, these marks, a lot of them had a lot of painful past, and this sort of, the paper becomes a container, the holder of space for this pain, which is turned into this possibility, which is turned into this art. So here we look at where they can face inner monsters, where they can face their own demons, and they can look at it in a non-verbal way. So they're getting more and more creative, more and more expressive. So you can see the movement from the squiggle to where we are now. Okay, the next one, please. And this is more of that, which is looking at the creative response. So we move from primitive response to the victim response, and then to the creative response, and then we move to this restful response. So as we're keeping on moving, we're moving to this idea of how creativity becomes a leap into the unknown. Creativity becomes a possibility for actually recreating the pain by acknowledging it, and then by expressing it, and then by being reflected by it. And here we're getting more and more graphic. The next one, please. And this is where we move to the role point, where we get the higher self in, and we physicalize our emotion. This is the 2017. The children have grown up, and as I've been constantly going to the same orphanage or the same group of children again and again and again, we are introducing them to different art forms. And particularly I used the children because they were to get them to reflect on themselves, because they lived on these liminal edges, and they never used to go back home in winters, and I used to come there. So we're doing this clown sort of work. We're using the nose. This boy has to grab the nose from my this false nose, and then wear it, and then sit on a chair. If you go to the next one, this nose is an object of transformation. This is a game called Kissa Kursika, where there's about the status and power and the shifting notions of status and power. And the boy grabs the nose and then grabs the chair, and someone else has to lift him off the chair and grab the nose back again. So it was a fun thing. But what we looked at it is that how everybody sort of moves you from power. The nature of power is a constant movement. And I think we wanted to look at how power in their lives is also constantly moving, and how status and power are this constant travel, which keeps on happening again and again. And but here, major important thing is that we physicalize emotions through theater. As there we were projecting it out, and here we sort of embody it and we physicalize it, of maybe anger, and everything is sort of fun and humorous, but it gets a chance for them to reflect on what their actions are. Okay, the next one, please. This is where they are doing a collective mural. The same boys then go back into the idea of how we look at the power within. and the power within. So the topic of the theme was given the power within. There is status and power outside, and there is personal power within. And here they're accessing the personal power. But if you look at them drawing and putting the matter, it is just a lot of emotions which are coming on. And if you go to the next slide, please, the murals will say this is very thick matter. And each layer and layer of paint adds on and adds on. It was so heavy that it almost looked like the paper would tear. And for me, it is an important aspect to see that they bring it all out. And if we do a next painting, it would be lighter. And but I have noticed this, that whenever I did mural work in Kashmir in the winters, and especially with the group of the first, after a long time, there were a lot of paint would be used, a lot of matter would be used, and it'd be very thick, it'd be very opaque. It would be not, beauty is not the point here, but much more to do with expression. And it's very interesting what gets erased, what gets kept, who, and it's very much metaphorical of what is happening in their lives. A lot of things are getting erased. A new phenomena is being added on. A new event is being added on, especially in conflict where the ground is constantly shifting, and the causes and conditions are constantly shifting. And this is 2016-17. This is before the abrogation. So you can see they felt the changes of things shifting and changing, and that's why erasure is a very important aspect in conflict areas. Next one, please. So this is a small little group, a community which had gone. There are children who sort of often protest, and this one boy in the right hand corner, his face had been blown up by a tear gas bomb. And we're looking at paper theater, again tactile material, and again looking at stories. Simple piece of paper could be used as stories with sound and with images and with visuals. And this is where we're talking about the idea of compassionate and wisdom response, you know. So so we're looking at these various responses, right from primitive response where trauma comes in, and trauma plays right through, and then it comes to this particular response, which is the compassionate wisdom response, where the dead material, the dead part of themselves, where there's a lot of PTSD, you know, paper as a dead material, it brings about the undead and the unsaid, you know, because as soon as this is a dead material and they start moving it around with sound, a part of them which is dead inside within them starts becoming alive. And you can see the joy later on what they feel. They're very minimalistic, very simple things to do, but they felt very happy doing it, making it with their hands and then playing it out, you know, in a playful manner. Where again, I said, you don't have to use dialogues, you don't have to use words, but in a non-verbal way, express what objects they have made. So marriages, funerals, mourning, celebration, all sorts of aspects of life gets played out. And when there is no films or cinema or any entertainment, this kind of work and activity in a closed way, in a conservative, militarized, violent space becomes very important for release. And this release brings joy in, and this joy allows also humor, allows a certain kind of illumination to happen, a certain kind of insight, a window of insight which takes place, then rather than just being the victim where things are happening to you. Okay, the next one, please. This is Manipur, which is very interesting. This is again near the borders of Burma, so you can see what has moved from Kashmir to the borders of to Pakistan to borders of Burma. This is Churachandpur. This is not very far from the border. It's not exactly on the border, but I'm working with a peace education organization, and we looked at how these children, class 7th to 8th, we looked at the idea of ghosts and as a metaphor for hauntings, as a metaphor for trauma, as a metaphor for, you know, what is their fear and what is buried within themselves. And Manipur has a history of from World War II to to the recent conflict times. There has been, you know, inter-ethnic conflict, not just with the army, but within themselves. You know, this is the Protestant, the Paite community, which had a conflict with the Kuki community. And I'm working with the Paite community. This is a mono-ethnic group. There are no Kukis here. They don't talk to each other. And we're looking at, their inner world. And here we are accessing very interestingly, as you can see, they will talk about their hauntings a lot. They'll talk about through their pictures, through their, what are their ghosts, what are they afraid of? So hell is a very important thing in terms of fear. They're all afraid that they will go to hell. And this is what sort of comes out, what hell looks like in many ways. We can see the next slide. Could we go to the next slide, please? And so this is images of fear, which is images of hell. Hell is suicide, murder, someone coming and stabbing them or them killing themselves. So homicide and suicide are often things which, sort of very much part of their inner landscape, which is very violent, and they hardly spoke, but they all showed all these with very beautiful etched drawings and the horrors of their inner world. And I sort of immediately understood that this is where mental health work is very much required as a part of their education, and these particular schools have to sort of collaborate with mental health, collaborate with trauma education, arts-based pedagogy. All these things have to go along with the curriculum, to support them, because there are special spaces with special needs. I want to just talk about this boy. He wore the mask himself and he became the haunting. He became that which is haunting him. So it's very interesting how this was an extra thing which he did. And his hand is showing the pen as a dagger, which is also very interesting what happens to trauma, that you want to fight it, but you become part of it. You become the zombie, you become the undead. The next one, please. And this is where we look at safety. After this exercise, I did a safe, because I wanted to give them a container. So the paper becomes a container, the drawing, the color becomes a container. We use these images of what you think is positive, imposed onto the child. So the child feels love, a self-love, a sense of an antidote. So you are constantly moving from the metaphor of the wounding to the metaphor of the antidote. And as we'll see more work further on, we'll look at how this antidote is very important, because the wounded metaphor constantly comes when you first suddenly work, and it's very honest and authentic, because the children will not lie, they will actually tell you. But this is something which I have imposed and said, let's do this now as an antidote to what the earlier images were. The next one, please. And this is where we see the wounded metaphor here very much strong. This is Kashmir again, and we're looking at the idea of the theme was broken bridges, because when militancy happened in Kashmir, a lot of the bridges were blown by the militants. And what does it mean by the disconnection? How bloody was disconnection? And the children, the young students in these schools did these installation of art out in the field. So we use nature a lot, and we use nature installation to look at this concept of broken bridges and what it meant to them. And so you look at the loss, which is also represent what there's not this outer connection, but also the inner connection. And I said earlier on that symbols in art are multi-contextual, and you can have this many interpretation as possible, and you can revisit the art as much as possible. And that which makes it very rich and very interesting. The next one, please. And this is where they are expressing their feelings of being a squash state at many levels. They're looking at this idea that they are sort of between Pakistan, India, and China, and they look at this blade marks, the slash marks, which is also about these years and years of long years of militarization. And these images come from 2015 or 16, and so I think it's very important to look at these sort of marks and look at this wound and to see what the militarized state has gone through. Yes, let's go to the next one, please. And so you see them handcuffed to history and to geopolitics. Yeah, this is the image. The next one here. So this is the last slide. I just want to look at what the pedagogy entails. It entails, what it addresses is to look at the culture of silence, where people don't talk at all, especially in these border states, express the unsaid. It looks at creating ritualized spaces for celebration and mourning, allows this sort of celebration and mourning, the two aspects of life, to take place, especially when there's context of disappearance and death which has taken place. Allow grieving to happen, to move through psychosocial interventions. That's what the arts help in. It allows the observation and reflection, which is critical consciousness, and especially because there's so many ruptures which has taken place in these conflict areas. And primarily, how do you create, how do you institutionalize the methodology within schools, within government places, within areas of care? How do you create this idea that concepts of care and concepts of creativity are actually one, So creativity and care, how do you sort of merge this together? This is the work in Kashmir. It's written I mean, especially in the educated institutions, because they are looking after the children. So is it possible to institutionalize this kind of methodology by the teachers as an act of care, through arts projects, through getting children to be arts practitioners? Is it possible for them to use the arts practice to address the inner world and therefore relook and rework their traumas, and to see, once the perception changes, once their reality would also change. With this intent is what we sort of do this work in conflict areas. Yeah, but this is the last slide. So let's go to the next slide, please. And with that, I'll say thank you. So the children are going back to school. And that's the slide which is very important. Back to school. What does school mean here? The school means here in conflict areas, particularly, of course, everywhere else, but particularly, it is a space for care. You know, a space where they can celebrate their childhood, a space where the teacher is sort of a facilitator and can create non-hierarchical spaces where the arts can be used for them to look at life as a mirror and to get their insights. With this, I sort of end the presentation. I hope you enjoyed listening to a strange subject as this. But looking forward to comments or inquiries about this journey. And yeah, this is where I end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vikram. I think the key highlight of your presentation is also the specific examples coming from the experience that you have had, the different kind of interventions that you have done with children. Thank you so much for sharing all of these. And also the chat was very, very active. Just in the interest of time, I'm just going to close out right now. Okay. But I am definitely taking out how we use specifically arts for expressing our thoughts and feelings. Maybe it's difficult to express it through words, but how we can use that to express what exactly we are feeling.
Sorry, Ellie, for interrupting in between. So the Streamlabs has stopped. Can we wait just for a minute or two for Ashwat to come back?
Okay, got it. Okay.
What has happened? Sorry.
So we have on YouTube, we stream using the device called Streamlabs. So software that we use. It got stuck. So we're just waiting for it to come back.
So when did it get stuck?
Just now. She just messaged at 5:53.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Vikram, the session was going very well. Just the last bit when Ellie was closing out the Streamlabs badge. He's just resuming.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so dear participants, really sorry for that technical issue, but we are back on live for this session. Vikram, thank you so much for this session. Like I said, I'm definitely taking away how we use arts for expressing our thoughts and feelings. And thank you for sharing your wonderful experience through the last 26 years. Thank you so much.
This is the last 10 years, by the way.
So I'm sure the amount of experience you have just be great. 15 minutes is not enough to summarize all of that.
It's been a challenge. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Fikra and Teach for India. But I just want to say that, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the non-verbal aspects, the body speaks 1,000 words, the images speak 1,000 words. And I think the arts sort of look at this and how can we communicate, you know, to the wider world, and particularly for them to communicate back to us. Yeah, so yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
Yes.
you so
Okay.
much.
All right, see you.